everyone, Alpha Eagle here again. Welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all doing well, and may God bless you all. I know I'm very late talking about this, but I wanted to share my take on the debate between Nerdette's Newsstand and Organized Chaos, as I have criticized both of them before. Frankly, I don't like either one of them, but there's a huge difference between them. Bob, from Organized Chaos, thinks of himself as a hero, fighting, as he says, misinformation and bigotry. But in actuality, he seems to be motivated by anger and jealousy and wants to take down the chuds rather than making things better for the fan community, as he claims to do. Tristan from Nerdette's Newsstand, on the other hand, similarly sees herself as a hero fighting for what she calls her community. The difference between her and Bob is that she seems to be at least partially motivated by passion and not anger, as Bob is. There's a huge difference between anger and passion. I see a lot of potential in Tristan, and she can use her passion for good. Unfortunately, Tristan's passion is sometimes misguided and has led her to the wrong side on many issues, in my opinion. In all my videos criticizing Tristan, I always pray for her, and my prayers seem to have paid off, as she seems to be slightly pivoting more towards the right side, and I praise her for doing so, although she'll probably hate me for saying that. Anyway, we will be going over their debate in this video. The debate was over 2 hours long, so I might make several parts to my commentary, and since it was so long, I also sped it up and edited it. I will post a link to the full video for context. As usual, I have nothing against Tristan. Bob, on the other hand, I like a lot less. I don't have any ill will against him, though. Anyway, let's begin.
The whole thing was you guys are ambassadors of fandom. When you don't talk about the properties, you only talk about the YouTubers. I understand you want to in the future, but you're not currently. You're not really making that content.
If you caught last initiative stream, we actually did a Star Wars ranking. And then I know Dane just did a stream where we just talked about a whole bunch of stuff that we love. We talked about Expanse, we talked about Big Lebowski. We do, and we also cover these guys.
You guys have an issue, right, with people making a bunch of videos about Brie Larson or She-Hulk, right?
Okay, so what you just said, like, when I was talking about us doing a Star Wars ranking or us, like, talking about Big Lebowski and stuff like that was not the context of our YouTuber. That was just us literally just talking about that stuff.
Right, but your main videos that you clip are not, ever. Like...
Well, I mean, I do lots of reaction videos, which is kind of the format I've gone to for talking about these guys.
That's your main content. So, like, you're talking about, what, 10% of your content is probably actual fandom-related?
Well, it kind of depends. If you want to go into the podcast, I'm sure it's a lot more.
Right, but you don't put it on your main channel. Your podcast only has like 150 subscribers as compared to a pretty decent-sized channel of 25,000. But what I'm saying is the fandoms that you are supposedly ambassadors of right now and trying to make an open fandom about, you rarely talk about. That's the point. But one thing I did notice is you guys kind of laughing or sulking at the fact that they make all these videos about Brie Larson. But that's exactly what you do for Regs or for Nerdette or Critical Drinker. You've made your content based around that and then make fun of them for doing the same thing. And it's highly hypocritical.
Tristan's argument is that the Fandom Initiative claimed to be ambassadors of fandom, that they initially set out to be an alternative to channels like Nerdette, Geeks and Gamers, Eric July, and other Fandom Menace, Comicsgate, or Iron Age channels that they claimed to be negative or toxic. They claimed that they would talk about fan culture in a positive way and not make millions of videos negatively dunking on Brie Larson or some other actress. However, they don't actually do that. Instead, they make millions of videos criticizing channels that they claim to be bigoted and spreading misinformation. That is the bulk of their content, and they don't focus on the fandom like they claimed. Tristan's point is that they are doing the exact same thing that they criticize other channels for doing. Bob does not want to admit that Tristan is 100% correct. Watch Bob try to weasel out of it, deflect, and try to change the subject.
When we're talking about like people like Nerdette or Critical Drinker, we're talking about people who are using their platform to spread misinformation as opposed to Brie Larson, who is an actress.
But you do the exact same thing. Like the exact same thing. They don't like what she says, so they make videos about her. You don't like what they say, so you make videos about them. You don't see how that's a little bit hypocritical?
Well, do you see, like, I have a question. One of the big things we do is essentially call out misinformation and bigotry.
Bob makes the claim that one thing that he and the Fandom Initiative does is call out bigotry and misinformation. In the next clip, Nerdette points out that so-called bigoted opinions are just that, opinions. They are not misinformation. And she is trying to get him to give her examples of the so-called misinformation that he calls out. Bob never gives any examples of this so-called misinformation that he calls out. Again, he tries to deflect and change the subject. So everything he says about the people he criticizes is just his opinion, and it's not fact. One critique I have of Tristan here is that she never directly asks Bob to give examples of the misinformation that he supposedly calls out.
Most of your videos that I watched in the past 3 days are all opinion based. I understand calling out bigotry, but again, that's opinion based too. So you're not calling, if you're calling out misinformation, like I did a video recently where the quartering said that Mark Hamill had a Nazi flag behind him, and it in fact was not. That is true misinformation. What you're calling out is your opinion. And I have I want everybody to have their opinion. But just like I want you to have your opinion, those people are allowed to have theirs too. Do you not see the issue with that?
I don't object to them. Like, if these are their honest opinions, I don't object to them saying them. I don't. I do have suspicions on whether or not they are actually their honest opinions at the end of the day.
But we don't get to make that moral decision, do we? Drinker is
I wanted to point out that Bob says he doesn't think that the channels he criticizes believe the opinions that they give. I've never once seen these fandom initiative guys prove that the channels they criticize are not genuine. They just assume that they're not genuine for no reason whatsoever. The only reason I can think of is that they think that just because they have a different political view, that they must be disingenuous. I would love for these fandom initiative guys to give definitive proof that the channels they criticize don't believe what they say.
Drinker is a talentless hack. That is a opinion.
If you want to say, like, that's an opinion, sure, I'll give that to you. But essentially, that whole video was just about him complaining about how Bo-Katan's taking over Star Wars and Kathleen Kennedy's destroying the franchise.
So that's his opinion, correct?
Yeah, but don't you see there's, like, when you have this well, let me ask you this. What's your thoughts on Kathleen Kennedy?
I don't care about Star Wars. I'm not a Star Wars person.
I love that. Bob is trying to deflect again. He brings up Kathleen Kennedy out of nowhere, and he does this because he has no examples of the supposed misinformation he claims to call out, so he changes the subject. And since Tristan is not a Kathleen Kennedy critic, it doesn't really work on her. Bob is not used to debating a liberal like Tristan who dares to disagree with him. But since Bob brought it up, I'll tell him one of the biggest reasons why people hate Kathleen Kennedy. She is a sexist misandrist who hates men. Now, the reason I say this is her simple act of wearing a shirt that said the Force is female. Now, imagine if she did the exact opposite and wore a shirt that said the Force is male. These people would hate her and call her a sexist misogynist. So why don't they call out sexism when it comes from misandrists? Because they don't care. Anti-male sexism is acceptable in our society. I give credit to Tristan since she did kind of call out anti-male sexism during the Johnny Depp trial. Then again, she finds Johnny Depp attractive, so she might have a bias, but that's another subject. Moving on.
Kathleen Kennedy is without doubt one of the most accomplished producers in history.
For sure, she's done a lot of great stuff.
You could argue these. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, these guys are talking about her like she's the end of Star Wars, all uniformly. And they're essentially talking about her like she's a diversity hire and special hire. I've heard them use that description for quite a bit.
Okay, one, I've never heard someone call Kathleen Kennedy a diversity hire. I'm going to need some context on that. Number two, some of the films themselves she's worked on has been successful. That doesn't mean that their success had anything to do with her. Continuing.
Kennedy run Star Wars essentially into the ground. You disagree, and that was your whole premise. Again,
well,
these are opinions. You said you're correcting misinformation, but you're not. You're just. But all your content is based around them having opinions.
Okay, but frequently, what I see in their arguments almost all the time is that she's some sort of diversity hire for Disney.
I have no idea. I've never heard them say that personally. I've heard them say it about the Andor guy. I don't follow Star Wars.
They said that about the Andor guy too. Don't you think that's weird?
Yes, it's fucking weird, and it's a dumb opinion to have. But again,
I have to strongly disagree with Tristan here. Diversity hires absolutely are a thing. I don't know how anyone can say it's a dumb opinion to have with the pattern of movies we've had in the last 10 years. Hollywood has admitted that they are purposely adding diversity to movies these days. So clearly people are being hired because of their race. They mentioned Andor, and the character's first appearance was in Rogue One, and just one look at the cast will show you that, of course, the cast was hired because of their race. You have black people, Asians, Latinos, and Arabs all on one team at the same time. Humans, by nature, are tribalistic. The odds of a team of just a handful of people having 5 different races on it must be 1,000,000 to 1. It would make much more sense if they were all black or all Asian or whatever, but to have some from 5 different races on one team? Come on. Race was definitely a factor when hiring the cast. To ignore this is to deny reality. And of course, it was led by a woman, and the villain was a white man because of the sexist Kathleen Kennedy.
But again, they're still allowed that opinion.
Okay, yeah, well, I mean, sure, they're allowed that opinion, but like when they're continuously calling out women and minorities in media, they're allowed to have that opinion, and I am allowed to have the opinion that that is bigotry.
Then how can you say that you are just correcting misinformation?
Simple. He can't.
I didn't say I'm just doing that. I said I'm calling out misinformation and bigotry.
And bigotry, right. So to them, not liking Brie Larson is the same. They don't like what she has to say, so they're just calling it out. Do you see how hypocritical this is?
Okay, so like, what are your thoughts on Brie Larson?
Did you see that? Bob deflected and changed the subject yet again. Tristan pointed out his hypocrisy, and he brings up Brie Larson out of nowhere. He brought up Kathleen Kennedy out of nowhere. Bob is such a little weasel.
Never seen Captain Marvel because it wasn't that interesting. I like Captain Marvel as a character, so I read a lot of her stuff. But as far as Brie Larson goes, I have no issue with her.
Okay, I mean, I actually, she has said some things I'm not thrilled with. That being said, have you seen her say anything that requires about 1 billion YouTube videos to call out?
No, but I also don't think saying the same thing about the same YouTubers over and over requires 1 billion videos to call out either.
Well, we've hardly done 1 billion videos, but that being said, she's just an actress who essentially stated her opinion about a movie. I think it was Wrinkle in Time, which isn't a very good movie in my mind. But essentially saying she doesn't care what white men say about the movie, and then all around the internet, people got triggered by that.
Right.
And I have to ask, why were they so triggered?
Because it was a woman saying that about white straight men.
Brie Larson essentially said the very racist, very sexist, very ageist, and very bigoted statement that 40-year-old straight white men should not be allowed to criticize movies that are not about them. Now imagine if she said that exact same thing about, say, young black lesbians. Would it be acceptable for Brie Larson to tell young black lesbians that they aren't allowed to criticize movies? What kind of reaction would that get from people from the left? She would be instantly canceled. But since she said that about 40-year-old straight white men, it's somehow acceptable. Why is that? Bob says that he wants to call out bigotry. So why didn't he call out Brie Larson's racist, sexist, and ageist, bigoted comment? Why didn't Bob call out Kathleen Kennedy's bigotry? Because Bob is a massive hypocrite and bigot himself, as we will see in future videos, since this is the end of part 1, and I might have to do a part 2 later. Anyway, that's about it for this video. I'm Alpha Eagle. God bless you for watching. God bless America, and I pray that both Bob and Tristan change their ways and move even further to the side of good.